and welcome to the Writing Instruction video series. I'm Tiffany Griffith, Director of Writing for the University of Evansville. This video is going to address common comma errors. Now, it's important to note at this point that this video is going to build on discussions from the previous two videos, the discussion of sentence parts and complete sentences, and the discussion of coordination, subordination, and sentence types. So it could be helpful to review or revisit those videos before moving on to this one. As a very quick review, we'll talk briefly about coordination and subordination. Coordination and subordination are ways that you join clauses and serve as a means of introducing variety into your sentences throughout an essay, and also work to show a relationship between the clauses being joined. Coordination links two main clauses, two independent clauses to complete sentences. You can do this through four different techniques. You could use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb, and a comma. You could also use a semicolon. This is a less frequently used means of coordination, and it shows that two sentences are closely related. An even less frequently used means of coordination is the colon. Again, you're going to use a colon fairly rarely. A colon shows a very, very close relationship between two independent clauses, with the second clause expanding on or providing additional information about the first. The colon is really going to grab the reader's attention, and you'll want to use a colon when you're dealing with a dramatic situation and you really want to focus the reader on the connection between the two independent clauses. Subordination works to put together two clauses by making one clause a subordinate clause. So you would have potentially a subordinate or a dependent clause put together with an independent clause or a complete sentence. Okay. Again, the main errors that we're going to talk about today tend to deal with problematically or unsuccessfully coordinating two clauses. The common errors we're going to address are comma splices, run-ons, and fused sentences. And again, these are errors where main clauses are not correctly separated or correctly joined. You can separate or join two complete sentences a few different ways. You can completely keep the sentences separate by using a period and a capital letter. You might use a semicolon. Again, this is going to show a relationship between two sentences. It's not going to be used very frequently. You could use a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb, like however, and a comma. You could use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or least frequently, you might use a colon, again, to establish and demonstrate a causal relationship and to really grab the reader's attention and focus the reader on the relationship between those two clauses. Okay. An additional way, again, would be to subordinate or make one of the clauses dependent. The first error we're going to address is the comma splice. And a comma splice happens when you put together two complete sentences using only a comma. Now, the comma is fairly weak in the world of punctuation, so a comma all by itself just doesn't have the oomph or the strength to join together two complete sentences. So, let's look at an example of a comma splice. I heard a siren. I pulled my car to the edge of the road. Notice I heard a siren is the subject, verb, complete thought, so we have a complete sentence, as is I pulled my car to the edge of the road. And the comma just doesn't have what it takes to adequately join together those two complete sentences. So, since you already have the comma in place, perhaps the easiest fix when you have a comma splice like this is to insert a coordinating conjunction that adequately and accurately conveys the connection you're trying to make. I heard a siren, so I pulled my car to the edge of the road. Let's take a look at another variation on the comma that includes a faulty use of the coordinating strategy of the semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and comma construction. And this is from an actual student paper. Most kids would have enjoyed having their dad as a coach. However, I did not like it one bit. Notice we have the conjunctive adverb and a comma, but instead of a semicolon after coach, we just have a comma. Again, an easy fix in this case, we'll just swap out that comma and make it a semicolon. But remember, the comma by itself, even when you're using a conjunctive adverb and another comma, doesn't have the strength to hold together those two complete sentences. The two other most frequent common errors are the run-on and the fused sentence. And I'd like to just take a moment to briefly talk about these. Not all handbooks will distinguish between a run-on sentence and a fused sentence. I think, however, it can be a very valuable distinction to make because it can help to clarify the relationship or the problematic relationship that's happening here. But again, most handbooks will lump these two together when they're discussing errors with coordination and how to correct them. The first one I want to talk about is a run-on. And a run-on, and when we say a run-on, what we refer to is not a sentence that runs on too long and just keeps going, but a sentence or sentences where you're putting together two independent clauses and you're only using the coordinating conjunction. And it's closely related to the comma splice in this way because it's sort of the opposite of it. So let's take a look at an example. Martha subscribes to 10 magazines and she doesn't know where to put them all. Martha subscribes to 10 magazines is our first independent clause. She doesn't know where to put them all is our second. And then we have and, our coordinating conjunction. And just like the comma isn't strong enough by itself to put together these two complete sentences, neither is a coordinating conjunction. However, if you put the two together and use a comma with the coordinating conjunction, you can successfully and fairly easily completely address the issue of the run-on sentence. So simply say, Martha subscribes to 10 magazines, comma, and she doesn't know where to put them all. Another example here has been taken from a student essay. Sartwell says that we are all killers, and that is not right. Again, two complete sentences, each make sense. You have the conjunction that shows the relationship between them, but the conjunction's not enough. So if you put a comma after killers, you have a comma and a coordinating conjunction, and your problem reaches a satisfactory conclusion. Again, you could use a semicolon, you could use a period if you wanted, but the conjunction shows that relationship very nicely. Now, again, related to the run-on sentence and often sort of lumped together with the run-on is what is called a fused sentence. And a fused sentence is fairly straightforward. It's when you have two main clauses fused together with no sort of coordinating device in between them, so that just cram one into the other, kind of like a nasty train wreck. Let's look at an example. The spring rains caused flash flooding. The townspeople moved to higher ground. There's nowhere to break. There's no stop. There's no indication of the connection between these two things. Now, you can probably infer the relationship here, but let's see if we can't correct this. And again, you can use any of the four coordination methods to correct any of these errors. The spring rains caused flash flooding. Semicolon, the townspeople moved to higher ground. The sentences are fairly closely related. You get a little additional information in the second sentence. You might also choose to use a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb, and a comma. The spring rains caused flash flooding. Semicolon, therefore, comma, the townspeople moved to higher ground. You might also use a comma into coordinating conjunction. The spring rains caused flash flooding, comma, so the townspeople moved to higher ground. Problem solved. Let's take a look at an example taken from a student paper. I felt like a lab rat as they hooked me up to machine after machine. It was very scary and nerve-wracking. In this case, you could argue for a period. Again, this would be a perfectly adequate way to solve the problem. They hooked me up to machine after machine. Period. New sentence. It was very scary and nerve-wracking. But again, you're not coordinating in this case. And if you want to show a relationship, you might want to use one of those coordinating devices. A semicolon might work nicely in this case. So we've looked at ways that you can effectively use coordination to solve problems with comma splices, run-ons, and fused sentences. So let's look at how you might change things up and add even further variety by employing subordination to put together these clauses. Remember, it's just another method for correcting comma errors. Make one of the independent clauses subordinate, and it will still indicate relationships between the two clauses. Let's look at a few examples. I heard a siren. I pulled my car to the edge of the road. Again, here we have a comma splice with only a comma putting together these two complete sentences. One way we can fix this, again, is by making one of the clauses dependent. When I heard the siren, I pulled my car to the edge of the road. Our main clause, I pulled my car to the edge of the road, is our more important idea right here. And then when did we do this? When did I pull my car to the side of the road? When I heard the siren. So you've got both of those clauses, but you've made one of them subordinate and one of them remains independent. Let's take a look at an example from a student essay. Most kids would have enjoyed having their dad as a coach. However, I did not like it one bit. Here again, we have an example of a different version of the comma splice with a faulty use of the semicolon conjunctive adverb comma coordination structure. Let's see if we can fix this by making one of these clauses dependent. Though most kids would have enjoyed having their dad as a coach, I did not like it one bit. We retain an independent clause, I did not like it one bit, and using the word though indicates contradiction to show that even though most kids would have liked having their dad for a coach, I didn't. As an alternative to subordination or coordination, you might even be able to find a way to condense the two independent clauses into one simple sentence or to one independent clause. Let's take a look at another student example. Sartwell says that we are all killers, and that is not right. Again, here we have a run-on sentence, two independent clauses joined only with the coordinating conjunction, which just isn't strong enough to pull them both together. We could subordinate this and say, though Sartwell's assertion that we are all killers is incorrect, what? We still have that problem there. So subordinating the whole thing might not work in this instance. So let's look at a way to just condense this into one independent clause. Though Sartwell asserts that we are all killers, he is incorrect. A different version of subordination happening there, but we still haven't quite gotten this down to one sentence. So, Sartwell's assertion that we are all killers is incorrect. Nicely condensed, we take the two independent clauses and combine them into one. As a final discussion related to these comma error issues, you might run into issues with commas not only when you're coordinating two complete sentences, but when you just have one sentence with multiple verbs. You do not need a comma when you have a compound predicate. Let's take a look at an example to illustrate what I'm talking about. Here we have a complex sentence. The sentence begins with a dependent clause and then moves to a longer independent clause. As soon as I got home, I grabbed the bags I had packed the night before in eager anticipation and ran out the door to my truck in search of my temporary freedom. Okay, this person is punctuating this sentence as if it were a compound sentence, but it's not. Look at this second part here after the comma. Ran out the door to my truck in search of my temporary freedom. This is not a complete sentence. One way to fix this problem would be to add a subject. I ran out the door to my truck in search of my temporary freedom. This would create a compound complex sentence. The other option is to simply eliminate the comma after anticipation, since there are only two verbs and not a series of three. But there's no need for the comma in this case, so you just have the two verbs. Again, I did two things. I grabbed the bags I had packed nights before and ran out the door to my truck. So you could simply eliminate the comma here. One more student example, this one a little bit shorter. Many professions call for long hours and require several hours of overtime each week. Again, we have a simple sentence, one independent clause with a compound predicate. There are two verbs here. Professions call for long hours and require several hours of overtime each week. Again, the easiest thing to do to fix this particular problem is just going to be to take out the comma after hours, because you simply don't need it in this case. So remember that if you're putting together two complete sentences, you want a comma with that coordinating conjunction. But if you have one subject that has two verbs, you don't need the comma with and. To recap some of the more important topics from this particular video, there are some primary comma usage issues when coordinating or putting together two complete sentences. These are comma splices, where you have two complete sentences put together using only a comma, and a comma is too weak to do the job. You have a run-on, in which you have two complete sentences with only a coordinating conjunction tying them together. Again, too weak by itself, it has to have the comma. Or you have the fused sentence, in which you have two sentences that are just crammed together without any sort of coordinating device to connect them and to indicate the relationship between the two. Again, you can easily correct these errors through the 4 different methods of coordination that we've discussed if you want to demonstrate relationships, Or if you also want to demonstrate relationships but don't want to coordinate, you could subordinate and make one of the independent clauses a subordinate clause. As another option, you could try to avoid coordinating and subordinating altogether and just condense the sentence into one simple sentence. But again, this might not necessarily be your best option if you're looking to create a lot of variety in the sentence structures throughout your essay. If you have any questions about coordination, subordination, comma splices, run-ons, or fused sentences, if you're concerned about them appearing in your paper, if you think you might have some there but are having trouble finding them, or would just like a review and have someone sit down and read through your paper and make sure you don't have any of these issues, and make sure that you're effectively using coordination and subordination to clarify ideas and add variety to your essay, we would be more than happy to work with you on this and any other issues at the Writing Center.